What is the best way to expand a mythos outside of the main story? A prequel, preferably one set during a period characters have mentioned in passing. If the prequel provides more context to certain aspects of the main story, all the better. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, a novella collection written by George R.R. Martin, does just that. Set a century before the main action of A Song of Ice and Fire, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is the story of Sir Duncan the Tall, a teenage hedge knight beginning his career after the death of his master. On his way to a tournament, Sir Duncan encounters a boy named Egg, who he reluctantly takes on as his squire. Egg turns out to be Aegon Targaryen, grandson to the current king of Westeros, and future ruler in his own right. The pair have many interesting encounters throughout the stories, with a trial, blood feud, and rebellious lords being the highlights. Throughout it all, the two remain loyal to who they are as individuals, while at the same time growing from what they each experience. Just like in the main novels, the Duncan Egg stories contain Martin's political commentary. Whereas the novels deal with how war is hellish and not as honorable as propaganda makes it seem, the stories deal with the aftermath and animosity civil war leaves. Both sides may reconcile, but some wounds never fully heal and grievances linger, sometimes for decades. In our story, the civil war was fought between those loyal to the Targaryens and those loyal to Daemon Blackfyre, the current king's illegitimate half-brother, with the throne at stake. The war lasted less than a year, ending in a battle at the Red Grass Field. Daemon was slain by arrows, his rebellion crushed, and his heirs retreated across the sea. Many lords who flocked to his cause were pardoned for their transgression, although the following years embittered them. Many lamented defeat, longing for Daemon and the future he could have made if he sat the throne. Some even hope that the Blackfyres rise again. This lamenting and longing is at the heart of the latter two stories. In The Sworn Sword, we meet Sir Eustace Osgrey, a landed knight who takes Duncan into his service. Sir Osgrey fought for the Blackfyres, and the years since the war have not improved him. We see two sides to the elderly knight, the nostalgic remnant of a once proud warrior, and the anger of a bitter, jealous old man. This bitterness is most evident when it comes to the blood feud between himself and Lady Webber, his neighbor. While the feud has its origins in a personal matter involving a refused betrothal, it was accentuated by Lady Webber being given control of the land stripped from Sir Osgrey for his part in the rebellion. The knight's bitterness runs so deep that he almost starts a war over a dam. While one deals with a former Blackfyre supporter who merely remembers and regrets, the other deals with men of action. These men, no longer held back by family hostages, plan to overthrow the Targaryens and place one of Daemon's sons on the throne. Since plotting openly would be too obvious and attract unwanted attention, the lords hold a tournament as an excuse to congregate without suspicion. Still, throughout the story they are on guard, not speaking of the tournament's true purpose to any outside the circle. Like Sir Duncan, the audience slowly unravels the mystery, odd little moments, such as one character's peculiar wording, making sense in the bigger picture. Like the main story, there is no clear-cut black and white. Everything is shades of gray. A point brought up several times is that brave men fought on both sides, a phrase that sums up war perfectly. While one might not agree with either side's personal motives, one cannot fault the soldiers for fighting for what they believed in. Another interesting point concerns Daemon II Blackfyre. While his father's reasons for rebelling might not have been fully justified, from what little we see, Daemon II is a pretty decent fellow, and if circumstances were different, he would have made a just king. If Bloodraven and Bittersteel weren't playing their game of human chess, Daemon could have served the realm in other ways instead of living in exile. As our point of view character, Sir Duncan is our gateway into the world Martin has created. Dunk has an interesting view on the events unfolding around him, especially when compared to the POV characters of the main story. He was born in Flea Bottom and has no memories of his parents, but with hard work he eventually becomes Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, a very prestigious honor. Granted, he attains this rank when Egg is on the throne, but from what we see in the stories, Dunk earned the title through hard work. Sir Duncan is the embodiment of chivalry, whereas most of his contemporaries would ignore their knightly vows when it's convenient and do whatever they wished. Duncan holds himself to his vows, even if doing so puts himself in peril. In The Hedge Knight, this dedication causes him to strike Aeron Targaryen because the prince was hurting a puppeteer over a perceived slight, even though this action ends up endangering his life. Sir Duncan could easily have walked away, but his knightly honor prevented him from doing so. This action caused the small folk to love Duncan, as they hold true knights in high regard. Like Eddard Stark, his honor is a major strength, but it can also be a hindrance. While he is honorable, Sir Duncan is also a knight of average intelligence. When it comes to one-on-one fighting, he excels, but he is slow when it comes to thinking around corners. At several points in the stories, it takes him a while to process something, and he scolds himself upon realizing how obvious the truth was. From a writing standpoint, this allows the audience more time to piece things together, but it also makes Dunk relatable. We've all had a time when we didn't notice something obvious at first. In addition to being slow, Sir Duncan can also be stubborn, a trait he and Egg both share. The best example of this would be during the wedding tournament in the Mystery Night. Dunk enters the joust, even though it is not his strong suit and he's out of practice. Doing so puts his horse and armor at risk, as he cannot afford to ransom them. Despite this danger, and Egg's warnings, Dunk enters the joust and loses badly, being knocked unconscious by a blow to the head. Dunk berates himself afterwards, but does the honorable thing and turns his gear over. He regains it by story's end, but hopefully the good knight has learned a valuable lesson about stubbornness. Aegon Egg Targaryen is our secondary protagonist, and like Sir Duncan is our gateway into the world. While we don't see things directly from his perspective, he gives his opinion via exposition, and there are moments where he must enlighten both us and his master. This enlightening mainly pertains to who fought for which side during the first Blackfyre Rebellion, and matching sigils to houses. Despite his young age, Egg's mouth does have a tendency to run away with itself, a trait some knights note, and one which Dunk is constantly threatening to clod his ear over. Even though he tempers this over the course of the stories, Egg still has room for improvement. Egg's only other major issue is that he has a tendency to want to use his heritage to get through problems, a solution Dunk constantly scolds him over. Despite this, the pair do use it to solve their problem in 2 stories. The collection's artwork is illustrated by comic book artist Gary Gianni, who's best known for working on Prince Valiant for 8 years. The style complements the genre well, and reminds me of art from an old storybook. My only issue is that Egg comes off as a boy younger than 10, but in Gianni's defense, it could simply be how Egg appears when standing next to Sir Duncan. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is a book I feel all fantasy fans should read. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and plan on rereading it sometime soon. A bonus is one doesn't need to read the main series to get a grasp of Martin's world, or understand the events that are unfolding, although doing so would provide big picture context. If you haven't read the series and are wondering where to start, this collection gets my vote. I'm sure you'll have fun traveling through Westeros with our heroes.